Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for this special event in honor of RISD's upcoming Founders Day on March 22nd. I'm Andrew Martinez, Archivist at RISD, and I will introduce my fellow participants shortly. A few notes about tonight's program. It is being taped, and a link will be posted for viewing at a later time. As viewers, you have been muted for the presentation. We encourage you to post questions for the presenters in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer your questions in the second half of our program. Also, if any of you have your own stories of student activism or SEI events from your own RISD history, we'd love to hear about them as well. I would like to start tonight's session by reading RISD's land acknowledgement. Rhode Island School of Design is built on what is now called College Hill, part of the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Nation. Indigenous people from many nations near and far live, study, and work in Providence today. The amplification of Native voices and histories is crucial to rectifying the many violent legacies of colonialism, and we gratefully acknowledge the ongoing critical contributions of Indigenous people across our state, region, and nation. By way of introduction, I would like to state that in the summer of 2020, during the national moment of protest following the unprovoked murder of George Floyd and numerous other Black Americans by law enforcement officers, as well as ill-willed vigilantes, members of RISD's anti-racist coalition, RISD ARC, presented a list of demands to the college. Among these demands was the demand that RISD's history of activism and documentation of Black and BIPOC-led movements be accessible online through the presentation of a collection of archival materials. Part of the project entailed hiring a graduate assistant to do archival research to bring more of this information to the fore. During this past year, Gabriela Cantu has been conducting additional research, and she'll be sharing some of the items she has found with you tonight. Gabriela Cantu is a master's student in the Global Arts and Culture program at RISD. Her research explores archival silences, performance studies, art history, and elementary education from an intersectional feminist lens. Before coming to RISD, she worked at Teatro ECAS as associate producer and at the John Carter Brown Library as assistant curator for digital outreach. She graduated from Brown University in 2018 with a BA in Science, Technology, and Society, following the Race, Science, and Ethnicity track. We're also joined by Joshua Coverdale, FAV student, senior from New York. Josh is a student activist, and I've gotten to know Josh also as a student employee in the Fleet Library at RISD. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Gabriela to start our presentation.
Thank you, Auntie, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. So this is an image taken from, Not Your Token is an image taken from a 2016 documentary that some students at RISD who are part of the Black Artists and Designers Coalition. They came together and created a documentary kind of expressing what their experiences at RISD had been like, feeling tokenized and expressing a demand for change on campus. And this is an interesting part of the research where we're looking at this moment now, this moment of unrest on campus and seeing where it started. And so the collection of activism that we're working from spans from 1960s to the present moment. For the purpose of this presentation, we thought it was really important to ground what's happening now and start in the 1960s, particularly 1969. So in January 1969, we have the statement of belief that, as you can see above at the top of the page, it's signed by Jim Simmons, a prominent student activist on campus, who we are hoping to be in touch with soon, who was one of the authors of this document that reads, "The Black students presently attending the Rhode Island School of Design demand that the administration, as well as the faculty and student body, become aware of its growing obligation as an institution dedicated to the development and practice of the visual arts. To remain relevant as an education institution, it must establish a meaningful liaison with the spirit and expression of Black American culture. Just this one part of the statement is incredibly important as an indicator of where students were at this moment. You know, they're being invited into the university after this moment of social unrest, a lot of broadly across the nation activism around civil rights, women's rights, and on campus, they're not feeling accepted for their, you know, aesthetic as Black creators, for their experience. They're not feeling included on campus in different ways. And so along some of the other documents that we'll look at tonight, we can look at why that is.
Josh, did you have thoughts or comments on this document?
Not at the moment. The next few documents I may, but not at the moment.
Right. Well, the statement of belief that Gabby is sharing with us actually has, if it goes on for 3 pages, and it actually lists 6 demands of the faculty or the administration at RISD, much like the RISD ARC statement that came out in the summer of 2020. And similar to that document, it asks for the hiring of 6 Black faculty members so that students might see, Black students we'd bring to campus might see someone who looks like them reflected back at them in the classroom. And the stipulation was that 2 of the hires would be in liberal arts courses, but 4 of these hire of Black faculty had to be within the fine arts and design divisions. Another demand made of the administration in this was that the teaching of Black art and Black history courses, very similar to demands again from recent times. And just this past month, RISD has moved forward with an initiative to de-Westernize the history of different disciplines and how they're taught at RISD in the history of courses, as well as in the last year we've seen and are going to continue to see cluster hire of BIPOC faculty to greatly increase the number of faculty of color teaching here at RISD.
Yeah. And going back to 1969, we're looking at how we want more, there's an expressed interest in having more students to attend these classes, to engage meaningfully in these conversations around what is, you know, meaningful, you know, celebrated art. And so from an administrative perspective, we start to see from a conversation Andy and I had, we were interested in looking, okay, well, how is the administration responding? This is a document that we found in the administrative files that lists 10 names that through, you know, we don't know their process. We don't know how they came across these names, but there are 10 names of students who are in the New England area who either have connections to the community, have artistic experience, like experience as practicing artists, folks who, you know, have submitted a portfolio. We had this, you know, we wanted more information about how successful was this project of bringing not just the name of students, but what happens after. And so I talked to Andy about, okay, well, let's look at the yearbook. From the yearbook, we can see, well, you know, in 1969 fall, who's registered? 2 people from this list of 10. Going to 1970, it only continues to be 1 name, Stephen Niles. And all the way through until 1973, at the end of the year, we only see Stephen Niles graduate in this group of 10. And this is a challenge of the archives. At the end of the day, we don't have the ability to go back and get a true sense of what the experience must have been for Stephen Niles and for his colleagues who did come and spend that first year of RISD education together, what we do know is 1 of 10 is not enough. And what was the culture on campus that made it so only 1 of 10 could successfully make it through? And this is where we start to even draw more parallels between what it's like to be a Black student at RISD in 1969 and what it's like to be a Black student at RISD in 2022.
And we have a memo in the archives dated from 1968 where our chief financial officer asked the school registrar how many Black students have graduated from RISD in the recent past. And this is 1968, and the registrar went back as far as 1955, so 13 years. Over that period, he was only able to identify 5 Black students who attended and managed to graduate from RISD. The impetus to start really recruiting and bring more minority, what were termed in the correspondence disadvantaged students, not only disadvantaged economically, but the school identified them as being disadvantaged educationally as well. But the school, in deciding it needed to really do something about this, the push really came from faculty and students. I won't say that the administration wasn't hesitant, but it wasn't reluctant, but it was kind of awkwardly taking steps as to how to make this happen. We have letters in the archives where administrators are writing to other schools and organizations, foundations, asking where can we find Black students to recruit and bring to the school. There seemed to be a lack of awareness of where we could find these students. So the first step was identifying them. The second step was enrolling them. And although the school identified 2 other steps, which it would need to do to be successful in this program, step 3 would be supporting these students once they're at RISD, and step 4, maintaining them. It seemed like we were unable to do that as an institution. In spite of the best intentions and the good efforts, I think steps 3 and 4 were lacking, and that's a reason why we see decades would persist with very little change in the enrollment of minority students.
And as I said, it's really difficult to get a sense of what campus culture at this moment is. But in May 1969, we start to get a bit of a glimpse. As Andy shared, some of the push for more Black faculty was for more Black-centered art classes. And, you know, this class, the Black History class, was one of those products of this push and this these demands. I can read some of this article that says there are going to be about 10 more Black kids. The administration first expected coming here next fall, thanks to RISD's class in Black history. The students in the class turned activist a few weeks ago when they tried to find out from the administration how many minority group students would be admitted next fall on scholarships. The class was particularly interested in this following the visit of 30 Black high school seniors to RISD in April. They came to take entrance exams and learn about the school under the sponsorship of the Black students at RISD and under the name Operation Pilgrimage. These students went to special classes during their stay and visited regular classes, one of which was liberal arts instructor Stanley Yarian's Black history class. The 2 groups of students talked for 2 hours in class. And so this is a really beautiful manifestation of how, you know, as I expressed, some of the challenges of being on a college campus. It is only 4 years of kind of trying to build community within a really small group of people within a very stressful environment. detached from the comforts of home. But it came together to create a class that not only represented community for them in that moment, but served as a draw for other students to come and hopefully stay and feel comfortable enough to express themselves and their individual creative vision.
RISD at the time, the administration in recruiting students really felt it. RISD was running record deficits at the time. The faculty were asking for an increase in salary, and the school thought that it would take a great deal of effort and sacrifice on everyone's part to bring in these students to the point where RISD was writing to foundations seeking outside funding to help bring in these students. It even came to the point where RISD had promised that in the class of 1969, we would be adding 20 minority students. And when it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to fund and provide financial support for all 20, students and faculty took it upon themselves to raise money to see that the school lived up to its commitment of bringing this number of students onto the campus.
Another really great find in the archives has been this thesis project that Rosalind Gerstein produced in May 1969. She had this kind of feature in the student newspaper Block Print that talks about how her project was focused on bringing cameras to primarily Black neighborhoods within Providence and teaching children about 12 years old how to use the camera, express themselves, go out in nature, connect with their community in different ways. I'll read some of this article. Rosalind Gerstein, senior in photography, is doing something a little different for her thesis. Her photographs of finished work are a bunch of 60-second snapshots from Polaroid swinger cameras, and she didn't even take them herself. What Ms. Gerstein has been doing for the past few months is teaching a group of 8 South Providence boys, 11 to 14 years old, all about photography. Some of the results are on this page and on page 4. So low res, but we can appreciate you know, the perspective, the developing artistic vision of these young boys. One of the questions that I have is how RISD institutionally supported this project and kind of informed this project. And, you know, this is a project that required equipment, a project that required her doing field work, a project that required her producing something that she can graduate with. And so the support for her as a white woman to do this work is, and her, as we can see in the next couple of slides, some of the photos that she produced for this project are signed by her. And so this to me led to the question of authorship and agency for these children who are not listed in the article, who are not listed on this photo that she submitted for her project. And so kind of, again, thinking about this question of, we've thought through some of the steps of what we're going to do to fund the project, see the logistics through, but when it comes to creating a culture of inclusivity, of support, it's not there.
RISD realized at the era we're talking about, the time, that it also needed to do a better job of reaching out to the community within Providence and finding talent within Providence as well. So following a model that succeeded up in Vermont in the summer of '68, we enticed the director of that program, John Torres, to come to RISD and run a pre-college summer program for what we term disadvantaged youth to come to RISD and have instruction in art and design. The feeling was that there would be deficiencies in the art and design training, one of the attitudes was that teaching photography and filmmaking would be easier disciplines to teach, less involved with technique, a lot of mechanics involved, and maybe one could also see more instantaneous results from the type of work in film and photography. So there was a push to introduce students to photography and filmmaking at the time.
End to end, I just wanted to share, not all of this push for change has led to recognizable change. Josh and I were able to see each other at the Black Biennial, which the opening was this past Friday, and it will be up through April 10th. And I think it's the first time that RISD is doing this, and there's established funding to do this every 2 years. And it's a really important moment to say, we're not just going to react to these moments of injustice and moments of students being forced to push back against administration. We're going to take moments to celebrate the beautiful work that is being made when students are being nurtured and supported on campus and around Providence.
Yeah, and like Gabby, I'm glad that you mentioned that because, going to RISD, being here for about 3 years now, and just you sharing like the experiences that students had like 30 plus years ago. It's really interesting. It's really interesting to sit here and look at the timeline, because as a student activist here, and this is my last semester, I can say that I've experienced a lot of these similar, if not exact, issues that RISD are trying to rectify. And as a Black student, and I do ask this of the institution, how can we do better, and how can you do better in holding yourselves accountable and really creating a support system, a system of some kind that really supports these Black students and really make them feel comfortable in this space and really recognize their talents and so on and so forth. And it makes me think about a lot of the work that I've done thus far over the years to really create outreach groups, because we want to feel heard and we want to feel recognized, because this is just so important for us to be able to receive the best type of education from a place like RISD. And for my senior thesis, I have decided to start a docuseries where I'm having a conversation with around 5 to 6 individuals who share their experience here. And they're sharing their experience, as well as they're revealing their talents and their work ethic and the amazing things that they do on campus. Because this is not a story just based on our trauma. This is also our experience, and we're also making work that speaks to a broader audience, and as well as speaks to those that can identify with us being so vulnerable in the work that we make. So yeah, Gabby and Andy, I really do agree with a lot of what you said tonight. But as Black students, we want our voices to be heard, and we want to be recognized. So. I think that's the question as I leave here. That's the question that I have now, and I will be watching in the years to come. How can you support these students, and how can you continue to keep these resources in place so that we can have a better outcome and experience? So yeah.
There's something I'd like to share in working with Gabby and going through the correspondence. She had mentioned Jim Simmons, who was the organizer and leader of the Black student community at RISD. He graduated in 1969 with a degree in art education, and I have a lead on him, and hopefully we'll be able to get in touch with him and sit down and interview him and learn a lot more about him. But in 1968, he wrote a letter to, or he made a statement to the administration, and I'm going to read you a part of it, but in it, he says, "We cannot believe that the admissions office of RISD has or is taking a responsible attitude demanded by the racial crisis in this country today. We cannot believe that there are so few qualified Black artists capable of fulfilling a teaching assignment at this institution. We deplore the fact that there are no Black administrators in this college. The Black student community at RISD comprises less than 10% of the entire enrollment. Of the 119 odd faculty members here, only one is Black. There are no Black administrators holding even small administrative posts." And I will read you the letter that President of the college, Albert Bush Brown, wrote back to Mr. Simmons in response. He said, "Dear Mr. Simmons, I've read with great sympathy your statement about the desires of the Black community here for seeing more of your community represented in our student body, faculty, and administration. I wish that we had done more than we have, but this is true in many other areas of the school as well. I am hopeful of seeing a deliberate effort on the part of the admissions office to widen the spectrum of applicants and students. I am hopeful of seeing Negroes and others not now represented on our faculty join our teaching force in the future. That our hope and will are matched by acts you should know, because several years ago in our central heating plant in our refectory, we placed Negroes in charge of the operating engineers and custodial services because they were the best craftsmen and leaders in their areas of responsibility. We are well pleased with our Negro colleagues in secretarial positions in the library and development office. I take pride in the school's leadership in those appointments, wish that there had been more of them, and encourage more in the future." So that was the hiring of Black individuals within the staff and administration of the school that the president was hanging his hat on. So in light of that, I'm pleased, quite pleased that in the matter of weeks we'll be adding a new president who happens to be a Black woman for the first time at RISD. So that's something well worth celebrating. So Gabby, in going through the material in our discussions, I think you detected or picked up on what you might say a paternalistic attitude on behalf of the RISD administration. Is there something you might want to say about that?
I think that's one of the most dense documents I went through. Some of the discussions on campus, there was a consultant that was hired by the administration office to do research, kind of outreach in these different schools and these different places that they were identifying where they might be able to recruit. And the feedback that this consultant had was really jarring. It was very, not just saying, we're going to have to adjust our university because adjust our university's practice towards what education looks like. It was, well, it's because they don't appreciate culture. They don't appreciate education. They come from horrible backgrounds where they care about, like drugs, violence, and it's perpetuating a horrific narrative of, it's a white savior narrative. It's a saying, just inviting them here is good enough for them. It should be, at least. And it's a moment that I don't know, because again, I said it's like 30 pages worth of notes, interviews that this person had conducted with students, with families. That makes you question who determined that this person was qualified to do this work that was so sensitive, to be trusted with those stories, to be trusted with their children at this institution. And we have changed things, I would hope, within our approaches and how we recruit. But it's a jarring moment.
Yeah, it at times it reads as if the institution is doing its part to cure society's ills by admitting these students and somehow this will go a long way towards making the country a better place. What's missing, I see it sometimes mentioned in statements that faculty are making, but what tends to be not evident in the correspondence we see from administrators is what are the benefits that RISD derives from diversifying and creating a more heterogeneous culture at the college. The faculty seem to be pointing out what gains can be had for RISD by reversing our poor recruiting efforts, but I don't necessarily see that recognition in the administration. I don't know if they were burdened by the task of finding and getting students here and keeping them here, but in 1969, 1970, we did have our first admissions officer whose role was to recruit minority students here at RISD. So.
And I should say, I think it's really interesting the work that RISD Museum, for example, is doing now in collaboration with, I think, the Teaching, Learning, or Liberal Arts Department. It's TLAD, I forget what the acronym is. But there's a really strong initiative to work with local Providence high schoolers and the museum. And it's a program that has gone on for at least a couple of years. And, I think in those ways that we see the university as an institution making a concerted effort to correct course, to really work with meaningfully and establish like these more mentorship dynamics as opposed to, extractive almost. Yeah, Project Open Door is the name of the project.
So we have the student activism site where we can take some of this material. I realize it's not the most visually compelling material, but some of it is dense documents, but we can add this material to that site, which is our intention going forward in the next month or so. Josh and Gabby, what are other ways we can make these stories known and get them out there outside of just the archives and get what we've found known to a wider audience?
Andy, I think that's a really great question, because I think that's something that us students are constantly thinking about, especially those that are being directly affected by all of this. It's like, what are ways in which we can really bring this awareness? And I think that it explains some of the reasons why I came about this project, and really choosing the route of just creating a docuseries and really using this medium that I'm interested in to really document a lot of this information. And hopefully, if I can bring awareness through different social media outreach groups, or even posting it on like websites and really just creating a platform to bring that awareness and to share it outside of the RISD bubble. I think that we're already heading in the right steps to really bringing this awareness and to really bring about real change, and something that I always think about, it shouldn't take 30 to 40 plus years to make change happen. It's like if students don't feel like they're being supported in a way in which can benefit their academic and personal growth, then it is something that we do need to address sooner rather than later. But again, I think I did answer the question, but I still think about that because there's more. There's always more, and what that is, we don't really know. I think that's something. It's something that I always go back to, and I think it's something that I will always go back to, and I'm really interested in through my research, just learning about more ways of really bringing that awareness. But it can't be done alone.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm speaking for you, but I think, you're doing an oral history project. You're sitting down with students and saying, I want to hear your story, the nuances of it, what made it yours. And I think that that's something that we've talked about, Andy, introducing to the archive, the element of interviews, or establishing a sense of continuity in this work that just it's cyclical. Students now are continuing to pick up where students in 1970 left off. And so saying that you don't have to keep repeating yourself, we hear you as an institution, is really important. And in any way we can do that through this project, I think that that's really important to pursue.
We have a question that came up in the question and answer of the question is, what has changed since the Not Your Token demands were made? What has changed was in response to that, RISD did create a office of social equity and inclusion, and along with that office, hired a associate provost for social equity inclusion, Matthew Shinoda. And also we saw in the response to the RISD ARC demands from 2020, the school has made a very concerted effort and has brought in a cluster hire of BIPOC faculty and continues to do so. And as I mentioned, the faculty has made a determination to decenter, to de-Westernize or decolonialize a great deal of the curriculum and the teaching within the departments as well. So I think that wraps it up. If there are no other questions, thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you, Gabby and Josh, for joining and sharing your experiences with us tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you.
Good night.